The sun was sinking behind the rugged mesas, casting long shadows across the plains and turning the sky into a blaze of crimson and gold. In the small, secluded village at the edge of Apache territory, a hush fell over the land. The villagers, bound by generations of tradition, were wary of outsiders, especially the wandering warriors who roamed the wilderness beyond the protective fences of their homes. Among them, one figure moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged more to the land than to any village, an Apache warrior whose name was known to few, yet whose presence commanded attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that seemed to hold both fire and mystery. He was a man of strength and honor, yet beneath that exterior was a soul capable of tenderness, a fact few had ever glimpsed. On the same evening, a young woman walked along the narrow path that led to the edge of the woods. She was beautiful. In her innocence, her long dark hair glinting in the fading sunlight. Her family had raised her with strict rules about propriety and virtue. She had been sheltered, protected, and sometimes constrained by expectations that left little room for freedom or curiosity. The villagers revered her for her purity, whispering about her as though she were something fragile and sacred, though she felt far from untouchable. She longed for more than the confines of her life, but the fear of judgment weighed heavily on her heart. Tonight, though, she was drawn by a strange impulse to the outskirts of the forest, to a place where the wild land met the cultivated fields, a place where she could be alone and breathe in a fleeting sense of freedom. The Apache was already there, his eyes scanning the horizon as if he could sense the subtle shifts of the earth and the wind. His presence was commanding, yet there was a gentleness in the way he moved through the trees, careful not to disturb the small creatures of the night. When their paths crossed, it was as if the world itself held its breath. He noticed her cautious steps, the slight tremor of anticipation in her posture. She noticed him in return, strong, silent, and unexpectedly intense. There was a tension, a magnetic pull neither could resist. Words were unnecessary at first. The language of glances, subtle gestures, and unspoken understanding spoke more than either of them could express. The night deepened, and the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a fragile bubble of time. They talked quietly, sharing fragments of their lives and dreams in whispers carried on the wind. She learned that he was not just a warrior, but a man who had seen much of life's hardships, a man whose spirit had been tempered by loss and survival. He saw in her a light untainted by the harshness of the world, a purity that was not weakness, but strength, resilience, and a quiet defiance. As the stars emerged one by one, the air between them grew electric with emotion, and the unspoken truth became undeniable. They were drawn to each other in a way that transcended fear, culture, and reason. In the soft glow of the moon, their connection shifted from longing to passion. Their bodies spoke what their hearts had felt for hours, the meeting of strength and innocence, desire and restraint, a collision of two worlds that had, until now, been separate. It was a night of surrender and discovery, of vulnerability and trust. For her, it was awakening. For him, it was revelation. The wilderness around them seemed to recognize the significance of the moment, as if the wind whispered encouragement through the branches and the earth itself cradled their union. When dawn approached, they parted quietly, aware that the world outside would not understand or accept the night they had shared. There was no shame, only a lingering ache of separation and the uncertain promise of what might come. Each returned to their respective lives carrying the memory of that night, memory that would grow in significance, shaping destinies in ways neither could yet imagine. The fateful night had ended, but its consequences, though hidden for now, were only beginning to ripple outward, setting the stage for love, discovery, and the inevitable reckoning that would come 3 years later. The morning after their night together arrived quietly, but for the young woman, it felt as if the world itself had shifted. The forest, once a place of solace and freedom, now seemed to whisper reminders of what had transpired. She carried with her a secret, one that weighed heavily on her chest, pressing down with a combination of fear, wonder, and uncertainty. Her thoughts raced as she moved through the village, each familiar path now tinged with a sense of danger and exposure. Though no one suspected a thing, she feared the judgment that would follow if anyone were to learn of her encounter with the Apache warrior. The rules of her village were unyielding. Purity was revered, and deviation was met with scorn, punishment, or worse. She felt the sharp sting of potential shame, and the necessity of secrecy became a constant companion. Meanwhile, the Apache had departed at dawn, disappearing into the wilderness as silently as he had arrived. His departure was not cruel or unfeeling. It was driven by circumstance. Perhaps duty called him to another part of the land, or perhaps he understood the peril his presence might bring to her life. Whatever the reason, he left with a lingering ache in his heart, the memory of that night etched deeply into his mind. In his solitude, he reflected on the extraordinary connection they had shared, wondering if she, too, felt its weight. Though he had lived a life of solitude, of wandering across vast plains and facing countless dangers, he realized that their encounter had changed him. He had glimpsed a vulnerability and strength in her that resonated with something buried deep within his soul. For the young woman, the following months were a delicate dance of concealment and self-discovery. She became acutely aware of the changes within her own body and the subtle signals of a life growing in secret. Each day brought a mix of awe and terror. She marveled at the tiny miracle forming inside her, yet she feared the scrutiny and condemnation that discovery would bring. She sought solace in quiet moments by the river and in the shelter of the forest, places where the world's judgment could not reach her. She learned to move silently, to observe carefully, and to keep her emotions hidden behind a mask of normalcy. In front of the villagers, meanwhile, the Apache continued his journey through the lands beyond the village, yet he could not fully escape the memory of her. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the wind carried scents of distant forests, he paused, imagining her there as if she were waiting for him. His life, once filled only with survival and duty, now carried an unspoken longing, a hope mingled with uncertainty. He did not know if he would ever see her again, nor did he know the consequences that might arise from their night together. The possibility of a child had not yet entered his mind, though the universe seemed poised to intervene in ways neither could anticipate. In her heart, the young woman wrestled with conflicting emotions. She cherished the memory of his strength, the tenderness that had shone beneath his warrior's exterior, and the passion that had ignited a new sense of self within her. Yet she feared the shame that would accompany disclosure, both for herself and for her family. She knew that if her secret were discovered, she could face ostracism or even violence. And so she lived in quiet isolation, speaking little of her fears, yet constantly aware of the life she carried within her. The bond between mother and unborn child deepened, becoming a source of courage and determination, a silent defiance against the strictures of her society. Though separated by distance, both of them were connected in ways neither fully understood. Fate had entwined their lives, and though the consequences were yet unseen, the threads of destiny were already weaving a story that would soon bring them back together. The secrecy, the longing, and the unknown future formed a tension that pulsed like a hidden current beneath the surface of their daily lives. Each of them moved forward, shaped by their experiences, unaware that the day would come when the child of that night would reveal the truth, forever altering the course of their lives. 3 years passed in quiet solitude, each day folding into the next like pages in a book no one else could read. The young woman had grown into a strength she had never known before, a resilience forged in the crucible of secrecy and survival. The villagers, unaware of the life she had carried into the world, continued to see her as the same innocent girl. But behind her calm demeanor beat the heart of a mother who had faced her fears alone. She had learned to navigate the delicate balance between obedience to societal norms and the fierce protection of her child, whose existence was a living testament to a night that had changed her forever. Her days were filled with labor and vigilance. She worked in the fields, tended to animals, and maintained her household, all while keeping a careful watch over her son, who had grown in ways that mirrored both her qualities and the strength she had glimpsed in the Apache warrior. The boy had dark, inquisitive eyes that seemed to see more than was spoken aloud, and a quiet determination that made her heart both swell with pride and tremble with apprehension. In him she recognized flashes of the man who had come into her life so briefly but left a permanent mark on her soul. Every gesture, every tilt of his head, reminded her of that night and the love she had shared with the Apache, love now channeled into the act of protecting and raising her child. Despite the challenges of village life, she found solace in small routines that became rituals of survival. Morning walks to the river, where the boy could splash and play under the sun, became moments of freedom and joy. She taught him quietly about the world around them, the plants, the animals, and the lessons hidden in the patterns of the wind and sky, instilling in him a reverence for nature and a sense of curiosity that mirrored her own. Each lesson, though seemingly simple, was imbued with the unspoken knowledge that life was fragile, that love was precious, and that courage could take many forms. The villagers continued their quiet scrutiny, whispering among themselves about the young woman's unusual composure, her rare moments of laughter, and the quiet authority she held over her child. Rumors sometimes swirled like smoke through the streets, though none dared confront her directly. She navigated these suspicions with skill, using charm, patience, and subtle deflections to preserve the safety of her secret. Every glance, every passing comment, reminded her of the delicate web she had woven, and she moved through her world like a dancer on a narrow ledge alert, graceful and cautious. Through it all, she never forgot the Apache. Though time and distance separated them, he lingered in her thoughts, a shadow at the edges of her heart. She wondered about his fate, his path, and whether he too thought of her and their child. The uncertainty gnawed at her, a reminder that the past, though hidden, could ripple into the present in ways beyond her control. She imagined him as a constant presence in the wilderness, his eyes scanning the horizon, his spirit untamed yet, tethered by the memory of what they had shared. The boy, now approaching the age of 3, was a living bridge between two worlds, innocent yet perceptive, playful yet endowed with a subtle wisdom. He inherited his mother's resilience and, unbeknownst to her, traits that bore the imprint of his father's strength and spirit. His laughter could fill the room with light, yet a glance from him could hint at the mysteries of his origin. She had begun to notice the small resemblances, the gestures, the innate sense of fearlessness and curiosity that set him apart from other children. It was in these moments that she felt both pride and trepidation, knowing that the day would come when the truth could no longer be hidden. As the seasons passed, the bond between mother and child grew unbreakable. Their love was silent, steadfast, and protective, a quiet fortress against the world. Yet, beneath the surface of this peaceful existence, the threads of destiny continued to twist and tighten. The memory of that fateful night, once a secret held tightly in the heart of the young woman, was quietly preparing to resurface. In the boy's eyes, in his laughter, and in his very being, the past awaited discovery, a truth that would change the lives of all three, binding them together in ways that neither time nor distance could undo. The forest was quiet that morning, bathed in the soft light of early dawn. Birds chirped tentatively, and the wind stirred the dry leaves with a gentle whisper. The young woman moved along the familiar path toward the river, her son's tiny hand gripping hers tightly. The boy's laughter rang out as he chased after. A fluttering butterfly, oblivious to the heavy weight that lingered in his mother's heart, a weight born of secrets, fears, and the knowledge that life could shift in an instant. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of her days, the routine of solitude, and the protective bubble she had created around her son. Yet, she could not shake a faint unease that had settled over her lately, as if the wind itself carried an omen she could not yet understand. Unbeknownst to her, the Apache warrior had returned to the region, drawn by a pull he could not fully explain. His travels had taken him far, through vast stretches of wilderness and perilous encounters, yet his thoughts had remained tethered to her. The memory of their night together had never faded. It haunted him like a quiet fire, persistent and consuming. He had not expected to return, certainly not to this village, and yet destiny seemed to have guided his steps, as though unseen hands had conspired to bring him back to her. He moved with the same silent grace that had marked his earlier presence, his senses alert to every rustle of leaves, every flicker of light. The wilderness was familiar to him, yet today it held a different significance. Today, it might reunite him with the woman whose memory had never left him as he approached the riverbank. The first glimpse of her and the child made his breath catch. She had grown into a woman of quiet strength, her presence commanding yet gentle, her eyes filled with a mixture of warmth and vigilance. And beside her, the child her son played with an energy and curiosity that immediately struck him as remarkable. There was something in the boy's gaze, a spark, a certain defiance mingled with innocence that stirred a deep, unexplainable recognition within him. His heart raced, a mixture of hope, disbelief, and the tentative fear that he might be imagining. The connection he felt so strongly. The moment their eyes met, the world seemed to shrink to the space between them. The young woman froze, her heart pounding in her chest, an instinctive awareness that the man she had long avoided, both in memory and in fear, was now standing before her. Shock, confusion, and something far more potent surged through her. The boy, sensing the sudden tension, looked up at the warrior with wide eyes, curiosity untainted by the complexities of adult understanding. For the Apache, the boy's gaze was both captivating and unsettling. There was a resemblance he could not deny, the tilt of the head, the intensity of the eyes, the subtle movements that mirrored his own. Doubt battled with a growing certainty. In his chest, could this child, so full of life and promise, be the result of that single night that had forever changed them both? Words were slow to come. She found herself searching for explanations, for excuses, for anything to maintain the fragile control she had so carefully preserved. He, too, struggled, torn between the desire to embrace the familiar and the caution demanded by their long separation. There was a tension in the air, palpable and electric, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Neither could speak, yet the truth pulsed between them, silent but undeniable. It was a moment suspended in time, where the past and present collided, and where the consequences of their choices, the hidden life they had created, suddenly became tangible. Finally, he stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the child's face. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, the subtle recognition and dawning realization. There was no need for immediate confirmation. The energy in the air, the unspoken understanding, was enough to convey what words could not. In that instant, everything shifted, their memories, their fears, their hopes, intertwining with the undeniable presence of the child who represented both consequence and possibility. The encounter, chance, or fate had set the stage for revelations that could not be avoided. It was no longer just a memory of a night past. It was a living, breathing reality that demanded acknowledgement, understanding, and perhaps reconciliation. The tension between them was palpable, as if the air itself had thickened in anticipation of what was about to be revealed. The Apache stood a short distance from the young woman and her child, his dark eyes fixed on the boy's face with a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. The woman's heartbeat thundered in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to hide the truth that had remained buried for 3 long years. Yet she knew that the moment had come when secrets could no longer be contained, when the threads of destiny had drawn them together so tightly that denial was impossible. She drew in a steadying breath, aware that the truth, when spoken, would change everything, her life, her child's life, and perhaps even his life as well. Who is this?" he finally asked, his voice low but edged with urgency. The question was simple, yet it carried the weight of years of longing, curiosity, and uncertainty. He was searching not only for an answer, but for confirmation of a connection that he had felt instinctively the moment he saw the boy. The child's eyes met his, wide and unafraid, and in that instant the warrior's heart tightened. There was an unmistakable familiarity in the boy's gaze, a silent echo of his own essence mirrored in the child's spirit. The young woman held her son close, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers, and for a moment, the courage to speak wavered. Memories of that night, the night that had changed everything, flooded her mind. She recalled the passion, the tenderness, the fleeting sense of belonging, and the fear that had immediately followed. The world outside their shared secret had never known, and now it threatened to intrude with a force that left her trembling. But she could no longer hide. The weight of 3 years of secrecy pressed upon her, and the truth demanded release. He is yours," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor that ran through her body. "The night you came. It happened, and he is the child of that night." Her words were careful yet filled with the gravity of revelation. The Apache's eyes widened slightly, and for a heartbeat he seemed suspended between disbelief and recognition. Every subtle resemblance, every gesture, every glance of the boy that had unnerved him moments ago now coalesced into undeniable truth. The child was his, a living testament to a night that had once seemed fleeting but now carried permanent consequence. Shock and emotion rippled through him. The realization brought with it a whirlwind of feelings, astonishment, joy, fear, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He had thought he had left her behind, thought their paths would never cross again, and yet here was a tangible bond, undeniable and irrevocable. He wanted to speak, to reach out, to hold both mother and child, but uncertainty gripped him. Would she trust him? Could he navigate the delicate boundaries of their long absence and her fears? The woman, reading the storm in his eyes, stepped closer. She felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension as she observed him struggle to reconcile the past with the present. "I have protected him," she said quietly, her voice carrying pride and a quiet warning. "I have kept him safe, and I will not allow anything to harm him. But now you know." Her words were firm, a declaration of her love and determination. As a mother, for a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Then he reached out slowly, almost tentatively, and placed a hand near the boy, careful not to startle him. The child looked up, curious but unafraid, and in that instant recognition flickered in his small eyes. The warrior's heart swelled with a complex blend of awe, tenderness, and reverence. He realized that this child, this living symbol of their union, was not only his son but also a bridge between their worlds, a catalyst for connection and perhaps reconciliation. Tears pricked the young woman's eyes, but she did not look away. In that moment, The barriers of fear, secrecy, and societal expectation seemed to dissolve. The truth had been revealed, and with it came a profound sense of release. The confrontation was over. The revelation had been made. Now the difficult work of understanding, forgiveness, and perhaps building a future together lay ahead. But, for the first time in 3 years, the impossible seemed possible. The first rays of dawn broke through the trees, painting the forest in shades of gold and amber. The young woman stood a few paces from the Apache warrior, her son playing nearby in the soft grass. The air was still, carrying the quiet promise of change, of decisions to be made, and of futures waiting to be shaped. The revelation of the past had passed, leaving them with the raw truth and the immense weight of what came next. For 3 years she had carried the burden of secrecy alone. Now they stood together, bound not only by memory but by the living embodiment of that fateful night, the child who had unknowingly brought them back together. For the Apache, the moment was overwhelming. Every fiber of his being resonated with the recognition that this child was his, a miracle he had never dared to hope for. He had spent years imagining what could have been, but reality exceeded even his most fervent dreams. Seeing her, alive and strong, having endured the trials of their separation, filled him with admiration and reverence. He realized that love was not simply a fleeting emotion or a moment of passion. It was endurance, courage, and the willingness to face uncertainty together. He approached slowly, mindful of the fragility of the moment, and extended his hand toward the young woman. There was no demand, no expectation, only a silent plea for trust and connection. She studied him carefully, her heart torn between relief and caution. The past could not be undone, and neither could the pain of uncertainty and isolation that she had endured. Yet in his eyes she saw sincerity, regret, and the longing she herself had felt for years. Slowly, she allowed herself to step closer, feeling the tension in her body ease with each step. It was a delicate dance of trust being rebuilt, a fragile bridge formed across the chasm of years. When their hands finally met, it was not just a touch. It was an acknowledgement of shared history. It promised to move forward together despite the challenges that lay ahead. The child, sensing the shift in the air, ran toward the Apache with the curiosity and fearlessness only a young child could possess. The warrior knelt, opening his arms, and the boy hesitated for a heartbeat before rushing into them. The embrace was tentative at first, but it quickly deepened, solidifying a bond that had existed in spirit long before it could be expressed. In reality, the young woman watched with tears in her eyes, recognizing the beginnings of a family she had once thought impossible. This moment, small yet profound, marked the start of a new chapter, a chapter where love, acceptance, and understanding would guide their path. In the days that followed, they began to rebuild their lives together, carefully navigating the delicate balance between individual autonomy and shared responsibility. The Apache integrated into the village with respect and humility, mindful of the traditions that governed their society but determined to honor the life they were now forging as a family. The young woman found strength in his presence, a reassurance that she was no longer alone, and the child thrived in the love and attention of both parents. Each day was a step toward normalcy, yet each step carried the profound awareness that their journey had been extraordinary, that the forces of fate had conspired to bring them together in ways neither could have imagined. They found joy in the simplest moments, teaching the boy to track small animals in the forest, sharing quiet meals, and speaking openly of hopes and fears. Laughter became frequent in their home, a testament to healing and the rekindling of trust. Evenings were spent under the stars, where stories of ancestors, of courage and resilience, wove together the tapestry of their shared identity. The past, once a source of fear and secrecy, became a foundation on which to build their future. Ultimately, their reconciliation was more than the union of two people. It was the merging of worlds, the blending of cultures, and the triumph of love over time, fear, and distance. They understood that life would continue to present challenges, but with mutual respect, trust, and the bond they now shared, they were ready to face whatever came next. Together, they walked forward into a future shaped not by what had been lost, but by what had been found. A family bound by passion, courage, and an enduring hope that even the most improbable love could flourish when nurtured with patience, strength, and unwavering devotion.